Starting us off at number 10 is the runaway Soviet space dog. Now, one fan theory on Reddit claims that Scooby Doo is actually a Soviet space dog. The show was set in the 60s, where the space race between the US and Soviet Union was at its peak. Both countries wanted so badly to be the first ones achieving any space-related feat, and I mean, the Soviets put a dog on a rocket already and shot it into space, so what's to say that Scooby Doo wasn't one of those Soviet dogs? The theory goes on to say Scooby could have run away from the Soviets' classified space dog program. The program most likely bred highly intelligent puppies that could understand radio commands and operate satellites, but Scooby was a rare one since he could talk. One of the scientists working in the program got super attached to Scooby, and knowing he would die if he was sent to space, decided to defect to the US and take Scooby with him. After the scientist died, Scooby found a new home with the gang, but it makes sense that the show is always like, Scooby Dooby Doo, where are you? Because the Soviets are still looking for their star pup. Coming in at number 9 is the Scooby Draft. I truly believe Scooby Doo will go down as one of the best cartoons in cartoon history, like hands down. And also, unpopular opinion, but Scooby himself was my least favorite character, and I'm not afraid to admit that. Come for me. Anyway, this theory explores the fact that we never get told why a group of teenagers and a dog are traveling around the country in a van. The producers were probably like, don't worry about it, no one's gonna care, and everyone's like, hello? Either way, this theory claims that because the show premiered in 1969 and the Vietnam War was at its peak at that time, the gang was actually driving to Canada to avoid being drafted. The theory goes on to say that Fred was drafted, but since he had all the mystery-solving skills and zero combative skills, he knew he'd most likely die on the field, so he decided to run away with his fiancée, Daphne. Since Velma is an activist for the war to stop, she went along with them as well, and Shaggy is clearly a hippie who's not going to go to war anytime soon, so he joined the gang as well. At number 8, we have The Cult. I never thought I would see the day when people thought the gang, the OG mystery gang that captured our hearts, was a cult. Let's break it down. We obviously have the handsome frontman Fred, Velma the brainy one, Daphne the pretty fashionable one that is low-key brainwashed by Fred, and Shaggy who has conversations with the dog. I mean, they could be an interesting group of friends, or they could be a cult. Fred is obviously the cult leader that recruits groupies like Daphne who will blindly follow him off a cliff if they have to. The group needs Velma since she's a genius, making her a huge asset. Shaggy is most likely addicted to some kind of drug that makes him think he can talk to dogs, but it also makes him the one that's most likely to do the group's dirty work in order to get his next fix. Filling at number 7 slot is Scooby Dooby Depression. Aside from their slang, all the flowers on the mystery machine, and even the gang's clothing, you can tell the show was set in the 60s, and the theory claims that it was set during one of the worst economic depressions ever. And if you think about it long enough, it really makes sense. In the show, everything is either falling apart or abandoned, hotels are empty, and theme parks are ruined. Every villain they catch is actually someone who would normally be quite respected, like a teacher or historian or scientist, but they've just fallen on hard times and have turned to petty crime in this dark period of life. And no, I definitely did not forget about the gang. You'd think they were just hippies out looking for adventure, but really they're in like their late teens, early 20s, not interested in getting proper jobs. They move around all the time because there are no jobs available no matter where they go. They wear the same clothes every day. Do they shower or pay for petrol? No one really knows. In conclusion, they're unemployed hobos that accept petrol and food for helping those around them. Knife in my heart. Now at number 6 are Scooby snacks. I'm pretty sure if Scooby-Doo was given an ultimatum of 40 boxes of Scooby snacks on one side or saving his entire gang, he would choose the former. He just loves them way too much. Well, according to this theory, the treat can alter your genetic code, which explains why Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Dum, and Scrappy-Doo can not only talk, but perform stunts that are utterly ridiculous. As for humans, the only person eating the snacks is Shaggy, and the only effect we seem to see that it has is boosting his metabolism tenfold. He can literally down those mile-high sandwiches and still be skinnier than every Insta-ho out there. Make it make sense. Is he on that fit tea, skinny tea vibe? Who knows? He's just on that Scooby snack vibe. Coming in at number 5 are the real heroes. In every episode without fail, when things start going to shit and getting scary, Scooby and Shaggy are always the ones to run away. And then somehow, in an accidental fashion, they end up being the ones capturing the villain in the end through no intention of their own. But according to this fan theory, Shaggy and Scooby are both actors who pretend to be terrified of monsters and ghosts. They're faking all of it in order to draw the monsters out because they want to be seen as easy targets. That way the gang can trap the villain since they'll they'll be too busy seeking out the other two. And all this makes so much sense. That's literally why Fred always pairs Shaggy and Scooby up together when they split up. Why would these two even be in the gang if they were genuinely that terrified of these monsters, and how, after years of investigating, would they still be scared shitless? Because they're actors. That's what we do. At number 4 is the designated driver. Yes, we've all felt the tragedy on a night out when you're the DD and all your friends are getting drunk, having fun, and you're just there twiddling your thumbs and making conversation with a plate of fries in front of you. Shocking. Now in the show, Fred is always the de facto driver, but just look at him. This preppy, clean-shaven kid would not own a lime green van covered in flowers, meaning the van isn't his. It belongs to a hippie, most likely Shaggy, and as many theories point out, Shaggy is a pothead. So either Shaggy lost his license for driving under the influence, or Fred is worried he'll make the gang crash, so he never lets him drive. Yes, never drive and smoke, people. Never drive and smoke. No matter how much of a functional stoner you are, don't do it. Filling our number 3 slot is the Captain America link. Who the hell would have thought that Scooby Doo would have any link to Marvel whatsoever? But I mean, you learn something new every day, don't you? Now this theory shares that Shaggy's real name is Norval Rogers and Captain America's name is Steve Rogers, so right now the two share the same last name. In the movie Captain America the Winter Soldier, Falcon is out on a morning run when he claims that Steve can run 13 miles in 30 minutes. If you do the maths, that's around 26 miles per hour. Now if we go back to Scooby Doo, we see that Shaggy can almost always keep pace with Scooby when they're running. Scooby's a Great Dane, and those breeds can run up to 30 miles per hour, meaning Shaggy runs at superhuman speed for a supposed pothead. So it could be quite possible that he is in fact Captain America's son. Now, at number 2 is the love affair. You guys are lying if you say that Fred and Daphne were not your original OTP. And if you're unaware, OTP means one true pairing, the two characters that were truly meant to be together, your favorite duo in a fandom, if you will. Now, we know these two are together. The show implies it way too many times. Shaggy is clearly too obsessed with Scooby to think about a romance. That bromance is enough for him. And that leaves sweet Velma. This theory claims that Velma was actually a closeted lesbian who had been in love with Daphne from the minute she saw her, but she could never say anything to her because she knew she loved Fred and the feelings would not be reciprocated and it would tear the gang apart. So instead she just lived with the fact that she could never get the woman she loved. Velma could have easily left the gang, but that would have meant not seeing Daphne ever again, and that's something she couldn't cope with. My heart will go on. What would their stand name be? Vaphne. Delma. It's not feeling nice in my mouth. And finally, at number 1 is Scrappy Doo. It doesn't matter which episode it was, Scrappy Doo always annoyed the shit out of me. How can something be so small and filled with testosterone and be that annoying? Actually, it's quite possible. I've met my fair share of guys who are like that. Lol. Now, either way, this theory claims that the gang wasn't fond of Scrappy either. He was arrogant and conceited, and they eventually left him behind. After they ditch him, he isn't seen for years because he's busy trying to figure out how to gain revenge on the gang for casting him away. By 2002, Scrappy makes a mechanical version of Emil, the owner of Spooky Island, and impersonates him in order to get Scooby's protoplasm. But his plan is foiled by those meddling kids and he's sent to jail, but that is not the end of Scrappy Doo, my folks. He ends up escaping and creates clones of Scooby and the whole gang and sends them to kill the OG gang and take over their lives. They succeed and somehow no one notices that they're not the original crew. Starting us off with number 10 is Under the Influence. Now, the legend that Shaggy is a pothead is quite an infamous one, but what was the origin story of it? Legend has it Shaggy used to be a really lonely kid that actually got bullied by the other members of the squad in high school. As a nerd, Velma probably bullied him for his intelligence, Daphne was a popular pretty one that just bullied everyone, and her boyfriend Fred the jock most likely beat him up. They mockingly called him Shaggy because he smelled. That was a nickname born out of love, let me tell you that. Thankfully, Shaggy came from a wealthy family, so financing his whole drug problem wasn't an issue, but you can also now see why he turned to drugs in the first place. Life was sucking. During his drug-induced hallucinations, he believes his deceased dog is somehow still alive and talks to him. He sees his bullies as his friends, and drugs give him munchies movies, hence he eats that much. The reason he stops crime and villains in his hallucinations is because he doesn't want anyone to feel the pain he felt at the hands of bad people. Bad people being his gang. Coming in at number 9 is Purgatory. I don't know why there's always a legend involving the characters being in purgatory, but it's a trope I quite enjoy. Now, this legend suggests that the gang is dead and Scooby Doo is this demon that's watching over them in purgatory while they suffer for their sins. They drive around putting villains under arrest to atone for their sins, but the mystery machine is also their tomb, so they can't stray too far away from it, otherwise they'll face the wrath of Scooby. Now you're probably wondering what sins the gang were even guilty of. Daphne was a femme fatale who used sex to get what she wanted. Shaggy was a junkie who overdosed and died. Fred was a womanizing sociopath, and Velma was too focused on academia to focus on anything else, which I don't even think counts as a sin, but sure. I mean, Purgatory also explains that the gang literally never changes their clothes. What the hell is that about? The laundromat must be booming in hell, let me tell you that. Even the 2018 Supernatural Scooby Doo crossover episode proves this legend to be true. The supernatural heroes Sam and Dean transport to the Scooby Doo world, and considering how many times they found themselves in hell or heaven or purgatory means this isn't even a huge stretch. At number 8 we have the red shirt. Shaggy is almost always seen wearing his signature green t-shirt and brown pants, but ever so often he sometimes wears a red shirt. Why does he do that? The legend says that Shaggy is in fact a slave to time travel, and that a future event that hasn't happened yet in the timeline forces the group to split up. Shaggy, along with Scooby and Scrappy Doo, travel around the US doing temporary jobs, and obviously Shaggy can't look like himself, so his disguise is the red t-shirt. Shaggy then ends up wasting all his money on a new car with which he goes into the South to get his inheritance. We see that happening in Scooby Doo and the Boo Brothers. When he successfully gets his inheritance, he wastes it on a newer car like a dumb and finds a new job as a coach at Miss Grimwood's finishing school, and we see that in Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School. Dracula, one of the students' dads, turns Shaggy into a werewolf, but he somehow escapes and goes back to human form, but not before entering a time vortex. There he goes back to the past, aka the future Scooby-Doo movies, and that's why he's still broke in Zombie Island. Aka Shaggy lives in an endless state of time loops, never actually dying. Every Scooby-Doo movie is just another one of his existences, which took me a while to wrap my mind around, but I finally did it. Filling on number 7 slot are supernatural entities. Has anyone else ever thought it was weird that entire towns full of adults in the show are so willing to believe that ghosts and monsters are behind all the crimes that take place? Like, why do they believe it so easily? I know it's a cartoon, but still. Well, one fan theory from Tumblr claims that at one point there were supernatural entities running wild in the Scooby-Doo universe. There are monsters in every single movie as well. In Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, monsters exist in a secret area and kill anyone who find them. In Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, Sarah Ravencroft's ghost is literally sealed in a book. So I mean, it's totally plausible that all the monsters and goblins and ghouls and ghosts are sealed up or locked away somewhere in some secret location in the Scooby-Doo world. Some escape here and there, so the gang has to catch them, and that's why people think it's totally normal. Now at number 6 are the 5 colleges. According to this legend, the creator of Scooby-Doo made the characters all have characteristics that match with one of the 5 Eastern colleges. If you're unaware, like I was, those colleges are Mount Holyoke, Hampshire, Amherst, UMass, and Smith. Now, the legend states that each member of the gang represents one of the colleges, and before I get into it, I don't know much about any of these colleges, so these aren't my personal opinions of people that go there, it's just what the theory said. Don't come for me if you go to any of them and be like, I'm not like that. I didn't make the theory. Now, Fred is extremely sporty and preppy, making him Amherst. Daphne is a stylish, put-together one that is most likely on the hunt for a husband, making her the upper-class Mount Holyoke. Shaggy is a druggy slacker, making him Hampshire, apparently. And Velma is serious. She's studious. She doesn't have time to worry about which guys are looking at her and which aren't, thus making her Smith. And finally, Scooby-Doo is UMass, since he's hyperactive and a bit of a party animal. Do you guys go to any of these colleges? Let me know if the stereotype is true in the comments below. Coming in at number 5 is Shaggy, you're a wizard. Do you see what I did there? Instead of Harry, you're a wizard. I'm lolling my ass off, I swear. Anyway, this one comes from Tumblr user Eternal Phantom, who theorized that Shaggy is in fact a wizard. Think about it. Now, it's usually only Shaggy or Scooby who can do things that you'd think are impossible, like levitating objects and just pulling mostly food out of nowhere. And here's more backing to the theory. The first time Shaggy did anything magician-like was in the 1976 episode High Rise Hair Raiser, where he accidentally casts a magic spell twice. In more recent movies, Shaggy seems to be the only group member that can recognize magical objects. Like in Scooby Doo and the Goblin King, a magical character literally calls Shaggy a wizard. What more evidence do you need, people? Shaggy, he's a wizard. At number 4 is the Trust Fund. This one makes Velma out to be the villain and comes from Redditor RDenty1. In A Pup Named Scooby Doo, we learn that Daphne's family, the Blakes, are quite wealthy and that her dad supplies the gang with their investigative equipment. It was at that point that Velma started exploiting her slightly airheaded friend and her family. And it's not just Velma, to be fair, the whole gang kind of just lives off the family's wealth. The theory goes on to say that none of the monsters are real, they're always people, and the gang still believes otherwise. Velma starts researching farms that are about to be closed, and as an activist, she then goes to that town and hires a local to don a mask and scare the kids. That way, she gets revenge on the town and increases her savings courtesy of Daphne, and is able to save the farms that are being shut down. So I guess evil, but also for a good cause. I don't know how I feel about it. Filling at number 3 slot is the sanest member. Back in 2011, Curtis Silver started his Psychology of Cartoon series, and the first episode was about Scooby Doo and the gang. He diagnosed every single character with a personality disorder, and in the end, Shaggy is the one that's the most sane somehow. Considering this whole list was just about Shaggy being a crackhead, literally. Now, before I get into Curtis's diagnosis, I just wanted to let you guys know, obviously these are not my own opinions. I don't mean to offend anyone by saying any of these things. If you have OCD or dependent personality disorder or any of the other ones I mentioned, I'm not trying to hate on you. It's just what Curtis said. I'm just going off what Curtis said. Now let's get into all his diagnosis. He labeled Daphne as suffering from dependent personality disorder and just forever being stuck as a damsel in distress. Velma has OCD, which makes her great for solving mysteries. Fred is a classic narcissist. He's vain and hates criticism or listening to anyone else but himself, and cannot stand Shaggy and Scooby. Scooby-Doo himself has dissociative identity disorder since he's a dog who thinks he's a human being, but this one is more hereditary since his whole family is like that. And finally, we get to Shaggy. Curtis labeled him as a scared pothead that occasionally suffers from paranoia. However, his paranoia isn't bad enough to be a disorder, making him the only member of the gang that doesn't actually have a personality disorder. He's also the only one that doesn't want to deal with the monsters and ghosts they keep having to deal with, which honestly is logical. Who would want to deal with that? Now at number 2 is Fraggy. I mean, what did you expect? It was either Fraggy or Shred, and none of them sound good, you guys. Now, we're all used to thinking it was Fred and Daphne that were a couple and in love, but this theory suggests that the real apple of Fred's eye is Shaggy. In one episode, the gang goes home for Valentine's Day, and Fred goes home with Shaggy, which, I mean, implies that they live together, as roommates, sure, or as lovers. In another episode, Fred meets a male biker and tells him his name is Fred, and then says, unless we're dating, then it's Freddy. Then, within a few episodes after that, Shaggy calls Fred Freddy. Need I say more? I feel like the LGBT plus community is just gonna eat this one up, but personally, screw Shaggy, I want Delma to happen. And finally, at number 1 are the snacks. This one was shared by Redditor QuackDamnYou, and it centers around Velma and Scooby snacks. I love a Velma story, we stand her so hard. Now, the theory goes that Velma was doing an internship at a lab and helping them develop top secret weapons. The weapons in question were super smart canine warriors. Whilst working one day, she felt this sudden rush of guilt about what she was doing and escaped with one of the subjects, which turned out to be Scooby Doo. However, there was a catch. In order for Scooby to retain his functions, he requires daily doses of this active agent that she was creating. To fix that problem, she starts baking the agent into little cookies, which ended up becoming Scooby snacks. Not knowing this, Shaggy then ended up trying one and is also now dependent on the agent as well. Is Mary Jane. So this one will make a lot of sense if you've seen the first live action movie of Scooby Doo, and if you haven't, the gang basically go to Spooky Island and a bunch of weird shit happens. Honestly, I've watched the movie so many times, but anytime I think about it from my childhood, it just seems like a lucid dream. Like, what was that movie? What was that? Either way, on the flight there, Shaggy meets this girl called Mary Jane and ends up having a crush on her, and vice versa. The only thing seemingly standing in the way of their love story is the fact she's allergic to dogs, and Shaggy and Scooby are inseparable, and therein lies the problem. But that isn't all that's bubbling under the surface. This legend theorized that Mary Jane was actually the Soviet spy sent to find Scooby after he escaped their space program, and she finally found him. She feigns interest in Shaggy to get closer to to her target and fakes her dog allergy to throw off any suspicion. Also, how ironic that Shaggy falls in love with Mary Jane, when he also smokes a lot of that Mary Jane. No wonder. Coming in at number 9 is The Curse. Now, Che actually shared this theory with me, and although I don't fully trust him, never trust Che people, I will agree that it seems pretty plausible. According to this legend, Scooby-Doo isn't a dog at all, but a cursed human being. The curse turned Scooby into a dog, and since the whole gang was best friends with him as a human, they set off solving mysteries and fighting off the supernatural in hopes of finding a cure for him, or at least a way to undo the curse. But since the show starts with Scooby as a dog, and even the recent TV show and movie has him as a dog, I'd say they're not anywhere closer to finding a cure for him. At number 8, we have The Real Message. In the entirety of the show, there's never been an episode, at least which I've seen, where the villain is actually a genuine supernatural creature or monster. It's always someone in a costume or a disguise. And I think that's the subliminal message the show is trying to tell kids, that no matter how scared you are of these monsters and ghouls around you, they are not real. They don't exist. You don't have reason to be afraid of them. Carl Sagan even called the show a public service in which paranormal claims are systematically investigated and every case is found to be explicable in prosaic terms. AKA, in more layman terms, every case in the show can be explained logically and not via supernatural ends. So I mean, on the one hand it empowers kids to not be afraid, but on the other hand it also makes them believe the supernatural isn't real, which I can't fully agree with. On the 7th slot is The Alien. Now in the previous parts of the series we explored how the recent Scooby can talk, maybe because he escaped from the Soviet space program, which I mean could be entirely true, we have no idea. But on the other hand though, another legend claims that Scooby Doo isn't even from our planet. The friendly dog was either abducted by aliens at a young age and his brain was enhanced using alien technology, thus allowing him to develop the ability to talk. A different version of the legend claims that Scooby is an alien himself and he was sent down to Earth to rid humans of all the ghastly monsters and evil humans that plague it. I mean, we need one of those right now. Now, at number 6 is Well-Rounded. I feel like Velma is the most underrated character in the gang. People are so quick to just stereotype her into a nerd, but this theory posits she's actually the most well-rounded character there is. For starters, yes, we already know she's incredibly smart, but she's also got superhuman strength as well. Despite being the smallest in the gang, she can carry every member in her arms while running away from a villain, which is a pretty huge feat. She also has no trouble fighting the monsters. For example, when the creepers stole her glasses, she straight up just kicks him in the knee. Honestly, I would too. I don't think anything annoys me more than someone taking my glasses and being like, oh, you're so blind, like no sh. Why do you think I freaking wear glasses to begin with, you moron? She has spunk, I'll give her that. Coming in at number 5 are brothers. This legend suggests that Shaggy and Scooby are somehow related by blood. I don't know how this one could work in any way, shape or form, but I am willing to suspend my disbelief, people. If Scooby was a cursed human, he could have very well been Shaggy's brother. I mean, no wonder they get along so well. They're family. It also explains why the two always split up together. They know each other inside out, and let's face it, in a group of friends, if you're about to get attacked by a ghost or monster, you're gonna say your sibling over your friend. Say what you want, it is true. Unless, I mean, you have an estranged sibling, then I mean, that's your problem. At number 4 is the deity. I feel like as much as the world wants to talk to their pets, we still can't seem to wrap our head around the fact that a dog like Scooby-Doo can talk. Well, according to the film theory, Scooby-Doo is actually an ancient deity called Anunnaki. These deities appear in the mythological traditions of ancient Assyrians, Sumerians, Babylonians, and more. The Anunnaki do not have physical forms, and so they have to take over the bodies of animals. Sumerians believed they were the most powerful deities in the pantheon, and that their role was to tell the Sumerians what their fate in life was, which is a lot of responsibility and pressure. A lot more than I'd expect from Scooby-Doo, but I guess every origin story has its pros and cons, am I right? Filling at number 3 slot is the breakup. In Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, Velma and Shaggy start dating before he breaks up with her in the episode Hell of the Fright Hound. The breakup happens after the couple have already hidden their relationship from Scooby-Doo as to not hurt his feelings, as he's obviously very territorial about his best friend and gets jealous easily. Shaggy decides to dump her because he realizes he misses Scooby way too much and that he's just not ready for a relationship. Well, if you weren't ready, you shouldn't have committed to begin with, Shaggy, right? Yeah. This theory suggests that the real reason he broke up with Velma is because he realized he had strong feelings for his sister Madeline after all. Matt has had a huge crush on Shaggy since she was literally born, and he'd always been wary of her because of it. But in Scooby-Doo Abracadabra Doo, he realizes that the feeling is actually mutual. I honestly don't get how both of them can snake Velma like that. Shaggy, she's known her whole life, and Madeline is literally her sister. I'd be fuming, to be honest. Fuming. Now at number 2 is Fred the Player. Throughout throughout the series, the tension between Daphne and Fred can be cut with a knife, but that also doesn't stop him from having his cake and eating it too. Despite literally having feelings for Daphne while they were growing up and always wanting to split off with her, he still has his fair share of girls over the years. Lena Dupree on Spooky Island, then there was Thorne, the lead singer of the Hex Girls. He was then infatuated with Gretchen Mueller, the snowboarder, then he really liked Crystal as well, but she was already dating someone else, and then of course Melanie Staples, who later ends up being the villain. He likes all those girls and then gets annoyed the one time Daphne suggests she split up with Velma instead of him. Lol. Like, what is that insecurity? You want Daphne all to yourself, but you also don't mind flirting with other girls in front of her. Player alert. I'd use a stronger word, but this is a PG channel. No sh**. Why do you weird shit? And finally, at number 1 is Fred. The gang's frontman Fred is both likable and annoying. I never minded Fred, to be honest. I thought he was a pretty good leader and a bit of a ting. But then there's people like Lindsay who think he's creepy towards Daphne, which I can also completely understand. As preppy and proper as he might be, he actually had a really screwed up upbringing. I was shooketh when I read it, I'm not gonna lie to you. Now, Fred's father is Mayor Frederick Jones Sr. He raised Fred his whole life and loves him dearly. Except that's not even his real dad. As the mayor of Crystal Cove, Frederick is more concerned with his status as town mayor and keeping the town alive. We find out that the monster that made the original Mystery Incorporated gang disappear 20 years prior was Frederick in a costume. He was so hellbent on making sure 2 specific members, Brad and Judy, never came back that he kidnapped their infant son, Fred. He then used him as blackmail to make sure they never came back to Crystal Cove, but eventually he gets arrested for his horrendous crime. So I reckon Fred turned out pretty damn well given the circumstances, but to top it all off, if that wasn't bad enough, after Frederick gets arrested, his real parents come back to Crystal Cove, but they actually come for the treasure they were looking for all those years ago and don't really give a shit about their son.